bright sunny morning shone over the town of Melset. The town was already bustling with activity. Small stalls and big shops were open, and adventurers and travelers roamed the streets. It was a typical morning for the locals. Veoford, a man with an interest in history, ancient texts, languages, and old documents, arrived at the doorstep of the household of Faye, a second-rate noble family well known throughout Melset. Veoford raised his hand to knock, but before he could, a voice from his right stopped him. "The butler said we should wait. The Lord has important guests." Veoford turned to see a beast-folk woman leaning against a pillar near the entrance. She had dark cat ears and a tail, and wore light leather armor. She glanced at Veoford and added, "He also told me to pass that message along to the other adventurer. Judging by your robe and armor underneath, I'd guess you're one of them." Veoford nodded, then sat down on the entrance stairs. The woman sat next to him and said, "You're a quiet one, aren't you? I'm Fina, but you can just call me Fina. What's your name?" "Veoford. It's the name they gave me," he replied. "Gave you? Who gave it to you?" Fina asked. "The villagers," Veoford responded. "Villagers, not your parents?" Fina asked, puzzled. Veoford remained silent. Sensing the awkwardness, Fina stood up and walked towards a flower bed by the entrance. While squatting to examine a flower, a large shadow loomed over her. She looked up to see a tall, muscular, blue-skinned man. Without thinking, she blurted out, "A Goliath?" "No, I'm an orc," the man corrected. "A blue-skinned orc?" Fina asked, surprised. "You've never seen a blue orc before?" The orc replied. "They're rare in this region. Blue orcs usually live in the west, surrounded by mountains. They seldom leave their villages. I assume you're here for the new generation?" Veoford said confidently, still seated by the entrance. The orc turned to Veoford and asked, "You know about us, young man?" "What's the new generation?" Fina asked, looking curiously at Veoford. "It's an orc tradition. To put it simply, it's a trial to determine the next clan leader," said a voice from behind the orc. Fina turned to see a woman with skin of a darker shade, almost like the deep ocean, and hair that flowed like water, reaching nearly to the ground. "And you are? Another orc?" Fina inquired. "Oh, pardon my manners. I'm DNM, a water druid, not an orc," the woman said, bowing her head politely. Fina bowed in return. "I'm Fina, but you can call me Fina. The guy sitting over there is Veoford." Fina leaned in and whispered to DNM and the orc, "I just met that guy today. He seems shy and awkward, probably doesn't have many friends." "I can hear you, you know," Veoford said calmly. Flustered, Fina asked, "How?" "Your whispering voice is the same as your normal voice," Veoford replied, unfazed. DNM chuckled softly. "I'm Caller, a blue orc. You're right, I'm here to prove I'm worthy of becoming the clan leader," the large orc said, clashing his fists together. "Then why take this quest?" DNM asked, intrigued. Caller scratched his head. "Well, it's my first time, so I wanted to start easy. I need to get familiar with this kind of work first." "I see, what about you two? Is it the same reason?" DNM asked Veoford and Fina. "No, I'm here for the money. The Lord is offering quite a bit." Fina replied. "Personal interest," Veoford answered. "And you?" Fina asked DNM. "Also personal interest," DNM responded. As the four continued talking, they heard the sound of someone running, followed by a distant voice shouting, "Ah! I'm sorry I'm late." A halfling, dressed in hunter's gear with a long bow almost as tall as he was, arrived, gasping for air. "You're not late. We just got here," Fina assured him. "Thank goodness," the halfling said, sighing with relief. He removed his hat and gave a small bow. "I'm Penrod, a hunter in training. Nice to meet you all." Fina introduced herself. DNM bowed. Kohler gave a thumbs up, and Veoford responded with his name in his usual quiet manner. "Don't mind him, he's just shy," Fina said, pointing at Veoford. "Gotcha, sis," Penrod replied. As they got to know each other, they heard footsteps approaching the door from inside. When the footsteps stopped, the door unlocked, revealing a silver-haired man in a butler's uniform. Despite his appearance as a man in his early 40s, his muscular build suggested he was no ordinary butler. "I'm Rogello Das, the Lord's butler. I've already met Miss Fina, and I apologize for the delay." "The Lord had important guests," the butler said, bowing in apology. "It's all right, Mr. Butler. We haven't waited long," Fina responded. "Yeah, this sister's right. I just got here too," Penrod added. Rising from his bow, the butler nodded. "Thank you for your understanding. "The Lord is now ready to see you. Welcome to the house of Fa'i." He gestured for them to enter. Fina went first, followed by Kohler, who ducked slightly to avoid the doorframe. Veoford, Diana M., and Penrod followed. "Follow me to the Lord's office," the butler said. As they ascended the stairs, Veoford's attention was caught by a particular painting. It wasn't the painting's beauty that drew his eye, but the fact that it wasn't a painting at all. It was a map of a continent he had read about in an old book. The continent of Letham. Of all the continents, this one bothered him the most. Every time he saw its map, he felt a strange sense of déjà vu. They continued to the second floor and were led to the furthest room in the west hallway. Upon reaching the door, the butler said, "This is the Lord's office. Please be mindful of your words. The Lord may seem pleasant, but he's a completely different person when angered." The butler knocked on the door. "My lord, the adventurers are here," the butler announced. A distant voice replied, "Let them in." The butler opened the door and let the party in. Inside, they saw a room full of parchments containing various information about crime, taxes, and more. The Lord of House of Phi, while not the town mayor, was the main contributor to the town's wealth and had helped the town numerous times, giving him authority over such matters. To the east of the room was a medium-sized couch surrounding a glass table, which held some of the aforementioned documents. To the west was a bookshelf filled with various types of books. Most were encyclopedias about different types of monsters, while others were about various races and alchemy. What stood out to Diana M. and Veoford was that there were more books about serpent-type monsters than anything else. At the center of the room, facing the door, was a large wooden desk piled with even more parchments. Behind the desk sat a man with long silver hair, marking documents with his seal. He looked up at them, smiled, and said, "Ah, so you are the curious ones who took my request." Diana M. bowed and replied, "Yes, my lord, we are the ones who accepted your request. Could you tell us more about the quest?" The lord's eyes widened when he saw Diana M. "Oh, a druid. That's rare." But when his gaze fell upon Kohler, his excitement grew. "No way. Whoa, a blue orc?" He stood from his chair, pointing at Kohler. The butler cleared his throat loudly. "Ahem. My lord, please take this seriously." The lord looked at the butler, smiled playfully, and cleared his throat as well. "Ahem, sorry about that. I got a little excited. I'm Vangam Phi, the 30th Lord of the Household of Phi. This quest is about finding an old document. From my various expeditions across the continent 20 years ago, I discovered a cave. Inside the cave is a stone-carved statue of a man, and written on the cave walls is a map accompanied by some text. The writing is in a language no one on this continent knows, the ancient language of Litham. What it says is this: your old logbook is located here. Only you can enter that place. Thank you for everything. He finished with pure excitement on his face. "But aren't we just stealing someone else's possession?" Fina asked curiously. "Yes, you're right. That would be the case if the old language of Litham wasn't last spoken thousands of years ago. But since it's been so long, we call it discovery now," the Lord replied with a grin. "But my lord, how can we be sure it's an ancient Lithamian language?" Diana asked. "Don't worry about that. I'm certain it's Lithamian," the Lord assured her. He then sat back down and clapped his hands. The butler handed him a pouch filled with gold coins. The Lord slid the pouch across the table toward the group and said, "Here, take it. It's 5,000 gold for accepting the quest. Once it's complete, report back to me, and I shall give you another 5,000 gold. If you manage to find the logbook and bring it back, I'll give each of you an additional 5,000 gold as a bonus." "Aha! I knew it. I picked the right quest. Count on us, my lord. We'll get that logbook for you," Fina said with a joyful giggle. "Rich man sure is rich," Kohler added, nodding. "It's a nice start for your first job, Kohler," Diana M. said encouragingly. 15,000 gold, baby," Penrod shouted, full of excitement. The Lord laughed and said, "Very well then, here's a copy of the map. You shall depart tomorrow." He handed the map to the nearest person, who happened to be Veoford. As Veoford took it, the Lord paused, looking at his face. "You. What's your name? I feel like I've seen you before." "Just call me Veoford, my lord, and I don't believe we've met before." Theoford replied. Is that so? I might be mistaken. Anyway, that's the map. The location is south of Ballymartin, the Lord said. The butler will show you out. I wish you luck, adventurers. As the party left the room and the door closed behind them, the Lord flicked his hand. From the shadows in the corner of the room, a figure appeared. Find more information on that Vioford fellow. He's a bit unsettling. Also, send someone to check the cave for any changes. The Lord instructed the figure. As you wish, my lord, the figure replied, vanishing back into the shadows. The party exited the house, and at the entrance, the butler bowed to them and said, I wish you luck, adventurers, as he closed the door behind them. Before the first bell tomorrow, let's meet at the west gate. Anyone disagree? Fina asked the group. I agree. Let's meet at that time, D&M replied. I'm fine with that, Penrod added. Kohler nodded in agreement, and Veoford, as silent as ever, gave a nod of acknowledgement. And so the party went home, preparing for the journey that would change their lives forever.